calling somebody fat, or using certain derogatory terms that might affect an individual. So as a result, they're never confident. Even when hanging out with family, certain comments that are made about the body affects the child a lot. So even family gatherings they tend to avoid. This can lead to loneliness as well. Next, what we can talk about is loneliness. Now, loneliness is a common word and it is associated with a lot of mental illnesses and otherwise. So, when we talk about loneliness, what exactly is it? It is more of an emotional state. It is a state of mind where the individual either feels there's a lack of, social contact, human contact. They may feel socially isolated. But even if social isolation is not present, the individual purely feels disconnected. So, when we say, I have a lot of friends, we usually hear this from a people who suffer from loneliness. I have a lot of friends. I am always surrounded by people, and yet I feel lonely. So more than looking at the quantity of relationships, people would need to start paying attention to the kind of relationships, the quality of relationships, to understand loneliness better. Loneliness can be temporary and it can be chronic. Now, temporary loneliness has a lot of reasons and chronic loneliness also has a lot of reasons. But nonetheless, the end result is that the individual feels like that they are alone. They are sort of isolated, that they have no one. These are the kind of words when we take anecdotal evidences that we see in describing loneliness. Now, when we look into what exactly causes loneliness, for a lot of people, it's a lot of different reasons. For some individuals, it is social isolation. They feel that nobody is there for them. They are what we would call loners. They feel isolated all the time. They have no friends. Loneliness can result from that as well. Somebody who is always shifting places, either due to work or even parents having different jobs and constantly made to shift. This can result in loneliness because they don't stay in a place long enough to develop any meaningful relations. So the moment somebody starts to develop a relation, it's time for them to leave. Loneliness can also come, like we said, when there is a lack of quality in relationships. It's all superficial, it's all surface level. As a result, when they would need somebody to talk to or when they would need to share something with somebody, they find it very difficult. I have 10 friends, of which all 10 of them are superficial. So when something important happens to me, I don't feel I have anybody to call and tell or celebrate this with. So that could also result in loneliness. Now, when we talk about loneliness, we can see teenage loneliness as well as loneliness in relationships. These are like one of the two major areas that we see when we see cases pertaining to loneliness. When we talk about teenage loneliness, again, coming with it, there are multiple reasons. Now, as a teenager, the child is definitely going through multiple phases of change in their social life, in their sexual life, in their physical life. A lot of changes are coming. So it is very difficult to get accustomed to these changes. If we take the simple example of changes in body, a lot of body image issues get birth in their adolescence, in the teenage years. So if the individual cannot accept them for who they are, they might slowly start isolating. So maybe somebody who used to go for a lot of parties or even outings as such, now as they become less confident with their body, as they start having low self-esteem, experiencing those emotions, they'll slowly start to isolate. So this is something that parents could look out for. If your child has been active, be it playing sports, co-curriculars, even in studies, but on reaching adolescence, they're slowly dropping in certain areas. You can have an open conversation with them as to why this is happening. A lot of the times, loneliness do play a factor. Now, when it comes to teenage loneliness, we also see bullying as a major issue. Bullying can be online as well as offline. It happens in schools. Mainly, it starts off with body image issues again, calling somebody fat or using certain derogatory terms that might affect an individual. So as a result, they're never confident. They don't like the way they look. They might not want to engage in social events anymore. So they take a step back. They refuse to go for movies. Even when hanging out with family, certain comments that are made about the body affects the child a lot. So even family gatherings, they tend to avoid. This can lead to loneliness as well. Again, when it comes to adult as well as teenage loneliness, mental illness is an underlying factor. While loneliness all the time need not result or be a factor due to mental illness, we can always suspect an underlying mental illness. Now, depression is one of the major factors where loneliness is manifested, but so does anxiety issues. Like we previously talked about phobia. In cherophobia, we talked about the individual refuses to go out, make social plans because they are scared of happiness. So any sort of irrational fear or phobia prevents the individual from moving, prevents them from making any sort of decisions or any sort of plans. So this could also lead to loneliness. When we talk about other factors specific to teenage loneliness, one is peer pressure. Adolescence is almost the time a lot of cliques in school and outside also gets to, start forming. So if the individual doesn't feel like they fit into a particular group, that can lead to a loneliness. We also talked about relocation. With parents' job, a lot of kids has to move around the country, move around places. But at the same time, this leads for, them to moving around schools as well. No relationships can be formed because by the time they form a relationship, by the time they form a friendship, it's time to move. But more than relationships, a major aspect that they might miss out on is certain social skills, ability to deal with certain situations. When a problem comes, how do I approach it? So if there is a constant movement, children might miss out on an accurate, good social circle in which they can try out these skills and therefore develop and improve them. And another main area where teenage loneliness is seen is technology. While we're more connected than ever, this can also lead to a lot of isolation and disconnection. On social medias, we've already seen there is a sort of different image that we put forward to showcase a different kind of life than what we really have. So when this distance is more, that is the life that I live and the life that I portray on media is different, there is a disconnection. There is a superficiality to it. So when real life issues, problems come, they find it difficult to connect to people online because the image that they portrayed is something completely different. So these are a few reasons as to why loneliness, especially during teenagehood, surfaces. Now, how do we go about it then? How can we address this situation? While a child may not openly, voice their opinions or views the fact that they are feeling lonely, this is something that the caregivers or parents can notice. Usually there's a shift in behavior. For somebody who was very social, who is very active, now starts to sort of take a step back. It can be due to academic stress. It can be due to too much focus on academic while they're retrieving from other activities. These kind of notations can be made and parents can address this. They can talk to the child, especially when it comes to body image issues, helping the child get through them, helping the child understand what is happening, helping them to be comfortable with their body and moving forward can benefit the child. Why it benefits is that teenage issues, when not addressed, later on becomes issues in adulthood. So like we said, lack of development of social skill, being uncomfortable with their body. If it's not addressed at the right time, later on in life it starts to be huge issues. So if parents and caregivers can make a note, start noticing if there is this kind of isolation that is being developed, they can address it.